You're listening to Depth Perception, supported by our patrons on Patreon. First, I want to say, spoiler alert for Fight Club, whole episode, we're going to be talking about things not necessarily in order that they happened. Before you go into this discussion, you should know that we're going to be talking about various forms of violence while we talk about this movie, but there's also one specific spot where we go into a little bit more detail. We have a brief graphic description of attempted suicide at about 41 minutes and 42 seconds. Other than that, again, before you watch the film, this is the kind of thing where you're going to maybe want to look into what other people have said, just so that you have an idea of what you're getting into ahead of time. It's a pretty violent movie. Look forward to part 2 of this little series that we're doing. Part 2 is going to be, we're going to talk about Birdman. Love that movie. When did it come out? 2014, I think. We're going to also talk about Joker the following week. These 3 movies all have certain similarities, many differences. They're all about masculinity, and so we're gonna compare them and contrast them and get inspired, maybe. It's going to be fun.
So tune in next week for Birdman, and the week after for Joker.
Check the Patreon, as always. Tell the people
About the Patreon.
Yes. Like it, love it, and gotta have it.
Do you have any idea what they can find on Patreon?
Show notes from past episodes. You can find audio extras, which we are calling our appendices, because they are looser. Sometimes can include multiple topics. Sometimes just include something we really had to get off our chests this week. And you're gonna also find original art, music, writings, whatever, over on Patreon from us.
Yeah, you sure can. I posted a song the other day.
It's great. You should check it out.
There's like 3, although Leo called it original. It's a folk song, so not.
Not always original. Sorry. Yes.
No, but I did draw an original picture for it.
Excellent.
I came up with an idea for a picture and I made it all by myself.
For the first time in Randy's young life.
Yeah, it's macaroni that I glued to a piece of paper. There's like 3 appendices on there already. We're gonna post one pretty much every week. If you haven't noticed, we've had like a change of schedule that we never talked about on the podcast. We're gonna just be taking 1 week off a month, but we're gonna make sure something goes up on the feed every week. You're going to get the oldest available appendix during our off week. You're going to get the oldest available one. We're going to do them sequentially. I'll make sure they go up Fridays in lieu of the episodes that we're going to miss.
You got it. That's right. Cool.
Also, reach out to us. I don't know. Do we have that in the show anymore? Reach out to us. depthperceptionpodcast@gmail.com.
Yep.
Or @whatagoodpod on Twitter. I'm not really like feeling the vibe of Twitch streams anymore. It's like kind of a bad vibe, I think. I think we're like not on our best game when we're doing that. So we're not going to really do that for now.
But
yeah, reach out to us. I would love to get some feedback from the audience. And I'm sure smart people listen to the show. If you're listening to this, I'm sure you're smart.
Or if you don't think of yourself as smart, you know that you could
let me be the judge.
You're kind. That's enough.
Yeah, if you have like an interesting thought, do it. We have a Discord. I think I forgot to post it last time, but I'm gonna make sure to post the Discord in every description, alongside the other contact links and the Patreon.
You can check it out there. Let's get sweaty with part 1 of 3.
That's gonna be the tagline. We're talking about Fight Club.
Fight Club.
The most macho alpha movie. Or is it? Let's dye our hairs way too blonde like Jared Leto. Pour lye over our hands.
Oh yeah, Jared Leto. Couldn't remember which one was Jared Leto in the movie.
Guy.
I couldn't recognize him. He got cooked.
Is that what happened
in
to him?
That one fight?
Oh yeah, in the fight. Yeah, I thought you meant he was burned alive. I was like, really?
No, I don't know why I chose that word.
There's a bunch of food in the movie, and I'm like, he got cooked. Like half the movie is about how they like come into food.
Is Fight Club a beginner alt-right sweaty boy Bible? Or is it something more?
Is the movie a 3-head movie or is it a 5-head movie?
Whoa, what does that mean?
Well, 3-head is smaller than a 4-head.
But what's a 4-head movie?
Well, 4-head is just a regular brain. But then there's like the Galaxy Brain movie. 5-head movie.
So you always have like a couple of unseen gears between whatever the impetus was and the joke on the surface. There's always a couple of steps. Randy, you should do performance art or something because people would just not know what the fuck you're talking about.
I should go to that famous clown academy that Sacha Baron Cohen and the hot girl from the Robin Hood TV show went to. Anyway, we're talking about Fight Club and what it's about and what it turned into and how we liked it.
And how you can help.
Yeah, and we're going to start a Fight Club. We're going to start a branch.
Yep.
But it's
right.
going to be super lax on the rules. You can talk about it all you want.
Yeah.
You can tell your friends about it so that they listen to the podcast.
Yeah.
So we should start with vibe. I would love to hear what you have to say about this because I can't pin it down.
It both feels like... So one thing that came into mind was Thomas Ligotti, actually. When I was reading about Chuck Palahniuk's writing style and the vibes of a lot of his work, this sort of like nihilistic stuff, this nihilistic tone that he has. I know that his like sort of personal philosophy at times he stated that like he is a sort of a nihilist, but his sort of conclusion, his philosophical imperative is basically do whatever you want. Nothing matters. Thomas Ligotti is a kind of nihilist, the kind of person who takes beauty and like, or finds beauty in horrid things. But I don't really know what his personal philosophy is. All I know is that the aesthetic of this movie is like a drab, dreary movie in which violence, but not only violence, but decay is constantly shown as being beautiful, and I don't know, essential to the character of things. That, to me, that's an important element of the vibe of the movie. In terms of the dialogue, I don't know, there's like this kind of like a lot of like witty, witty is such a vague term.
It's a really smart, like snappy movie. Like
it's a smart, snappy movie. The dialogue carries the scenes a lot of the time, and when it's not, it's the visuals.
I told you yesterday, but I have to say it on the podcast. I would love to read the book sometime, just to see what is like the DNA of the movie versus the book. But yeah, the movie is like whip smart, which is it's so nice when like a movie talks to you like you're an adult. Yeah,
definitely. God, I feel like we should have already done this so we don't have to do it later. A lot of fucked up things happen in these movies. I mean, it's, not as bad as Clockwork Orange, but,
Oh, did I say that I wanted to do that in this? I was thinking about that while we were on the phone.
It wouldn't be bad if we're doing a series on movies about masculinity.
Yeah, so what's your vibe on the vibe of the movie? Because I think if I was going to complain about this movie is that it doesn't really like have like a clear like feeling in the way that like Star Wars has kind of like embraced like grimy 70s sci-fi, or like I don't know, like the Resident Evil movies are like goofy horror schlock, like B-movie crap, or like anything like that. It doesn't feel like it has like a super distinct, like clear, like crispy tone to me.
No, I agree actually. You know what it reminds me of a little bit? Also the era, like early Christopher Nolan movies.
Yeah, I mean, if I was going to complain about the movie, that would be like one of the two things I complain about for sure.
Yeah, and I know what the other one is.
Yeah.
We'll get there too.
Oh, and I want to complain about Meatloaf also, but I'm not going to. He played like a really like sad character.
That's true.
It's just so weird to see Meatloaf.
It was weird.
I mean, I just bet that there is every single Meatloaf CD. But not like a real CD, not like the real CDs. Like every Meatloaf Greatest Hits album, I bet is in my house.
Wow.
Yeah. We loved Meatloaf in this house when I was little. He might, in fact, be why I saw the movie for the first time, if I'm, like, pulling at strings.
Wow. Thank you, Meatloaf.
I know for sure he's the reason I watched Tenacious D.
My first experience with Meatloaf was flipping through a jukebox with Mr. Loaf.
Meat to his friends.
Was flipping through a jukebox at a bar somewhere and seeing Bad Out of Hell and being kind of scandalized because I was a kid and it had a swear word.
Not because you were a kid in a bar, but because you saw a swear word on the jukebox.
No, it was one of those bars that, I don't know, wandered in from the family restaurant kind of situations, I would assume.
Oh,
yeah.
so it's like the
No, I was drinking in the bar at age 6, and I
had a cigar. I had a cigar and an old fashioned.
Yep, and I stumbled over to the jukebox.
I hit it with my elbow,
and I saw it, and it started playing Bad Out of Hell, and I started crying when they said the word hell.
Other than that, I guess we have to talk about we have to say who the characters are. You have Edward Norton as the narrator. I think people probably would choose to call him Jack if they were going to give him a name.
Yeah, Jack.
You have Brad Pitt as Tyler Durden, a.k.a. Jack. And you have Helena Bonham Carter as Marla?
Marla Singer.
I was going to say Marla Fisher. Both professions.
Wrong profession.
Yeah, Marla Singer. And that's pretty much it. I mean, you have Jared Leto as the blonde guy, and you have Meatloaf as the guy that looks like a meatloaf. And that's pretty much it. I don't really remember anybody else that was important from the movie.
Yeah, the boss. Jack's boss. Maybe that's
Jack's boss, yeah. He looks like Alan Arkin or something.
So what happens in this movie? We open with Jack, who works a job. No, so actually, we know that Jack works a job that he doesn't like, but that gives him all of the stuff that he needs. The money to buy IKEA to decorate his high-rise apartment.
Well, it's actually really poetic that his job is what it is. I mean, I'm sure it is what it
Yes.
is, and the thing that happens later happens because that's what the job is. I'm sure they're intrinsically together, but...
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What is his job?
He is a claims filer about insurance about car insurance.
Yeah, but for the car companies themselves.
Yeah, he audits accidents for the car company.
He works for a major car company
because they have to figure out if there's a recall.
Yeah, exactly. To decide whether or not a recall would be worth the money that it would cost if they were just to let people die and pay the settlements. So that's his job. And he is insomniac and depressed and starts going to self-help groups after a chance remark that his doctor makes about a testicular cancer support group. He starts going to it.
I get the vibe that his doctor is talking shit to him. He's like, you think you got it bad. You got to go see what these guys are dealing with.
Yep, and that opens a door to him, it turns out. He starts faking that he has these conditions so that he can be real with people. One nice line in the movie was when he's talking about this with Marla shortly after. He says, they both kind of acknowledge that the thing about it that's...
Doesn't he meet her specifically at testicular cancer therapy?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. The thing that's valuable about all this is that people speak to you without waiting their turn to speak, or they listen to you without waiting their turn to speak. Something that Randy and I could, of course, always improve on.
Whatever.
We're pretty good at it.
Yeah, he has his awakening.
He has his awakening. He thinks he has his awakening. But he's still pretty hung up because, as it turns out, the presence of Marla, who, unlike him, is obviously faking because he literally meets her at a testicular cancer support group. She doesn't have testicles. She smokes openly, at the meeting.
She points out that she has more of a reason to be there than he does.
Takes up a lot of space, but nobody seems to mind. Whereas he is trying to blend in. and like he can't open up, he can't let loose, he can't cry at these meetings anymore with her. He confronts her because he's going to one or two every night of the week, all these different support groups. She ends up at all of the same ones as him. So yeah, the fact that she makes visible what he does secretly is too much for him, and he confronts her, and they basically divide up the days. This is around the time that we see Jack's on a business trip. He meets a guy on a plane. It's a soap maker. Gives him his business card, right? That's Tyler. That same night,
they have the same suitcase. I wonder if that's
the same suitcase.
Be important.
They have the same suitcase. Yes. Later that night, he gets home because he's on the plane on his way home, and he comes home to see that his apartment is completely destroyed, blown out. Like, he's on the street and his shit is in the street.
There was an explosion.
Like 15 stories lower, yeah, or whatever. And so he tries to call Marla, can't get Marla. Calls the number on the business card that Tyler gave him on the plane. Meets him for drinks. Tyler pushes him into asking him he basically, like, he knows that the implication is that he knows that Jack wants to ask him if he can stay there, but it's a really well acted scene. It's clear that Jack really doesn't want to ask Tyler, to the point that he's not really aware of his own unconscious.
He needs the offer to be made.
He needs the offer to be made. He needs it to be set up for him. He makes the offer finally. He finally says it. Tyler says, "Yeah, you can come. You can stay at my place." And then he says, "You got to hit me though." And then begins, I think, right then, what becomes Fight Club. They punch each other in the parking lot and then have a drink, and then he lives with Tyler now.
Important plot that we have to talk about until
like it's okay if we don't summarize everything. I just wanted the exposition because I think it's a good foundation, you know.
I think the beginning and the end of the movie are what we have to talk about. I mean, most of the middle is just like machines whirring,
people whirring, escalations, a lot of glorified violence, like aestheticized, like beautiful violence, but violence.
Yeah. The one like big thing from the middle of the movie. Well, two things, I guess, if I'm remembering where the car accident happens. So there's Jack getting fired, and turning that into like settling out of court immediately,
getting a monthly or a weekly paycheck to not say anything forever.
What he does is he's like getting reamed out by his boss, and he beats himself up, and he makes it look like his boss did it.
Yep.
And then he whistles.
Iconic.
It's fucking brutal. The scene. I mean, I can't imagine. We find it. I mean, spoiler alert. Everybody knows what Fight Club is. Even if you don't, you better. There's not. It's just Jack. There's just Jack. Really. So he's beating himself up the whole time. But this is the first time we see the guy like beating the shit out of himself. He like throws himself into glass, and he ruins his body for a couple days for sure. And then there's the car accident where Tyler is teaching Jack the lesson about letting go, and that culminates in Tyler like letting go of the steering wheel and crashing the car. Yeah, and so then we get to the end of the movie eventually, and basically what's happened is Fight Club has like gone out of control. It's like a full on like terrorist organization. They're like making explosives. They like hand over their identities, and they they like basically just become like part of the machine that is Project Mayhem. And I'm like not super clear on the goals. I think I don't think the idea is just supposed to be like disorganized chaos. Like they obviously like pick targets and shit.
Yeah.
But
They say that, but what it really is to me is actually like it's kind of a throwback to like when there's massive inequality like in ancient societies and in like the Fertile Crescent, like in ancient Mesopotamia. New regime takes power, new king, whatever. Well, I'm taking this from my source is David Graeber. My one source really is debt, the first 5,000 years, right? So in debt, he talks about how debt jubilees are like a huge thing. Like it's what a king is going to come and say, okay, let's cancel all the debts. All the people who are in peonage or slavery or whatever, like ostensibly will be released from their debt bonds and allowed to return to farm. Basically, all of these workers end up getting subsumed into these massive hierarchies of debtors and creditors, right? And then okay, we release the tension, like now the society functions again. What he's doing is kind of that. It's a debt jubilee, but it's based on like you literally have to physically destroy these objects, and it's not a top down debt jubilee. It's rather like a bottom up debt jubilee. Like there's something anarchic about the way that Fight Club functions, right? Like it ends up even taking one of the less believable things about the movie is when the police end up being subsumed into Fight Club as well and supporting him. But everybody seems to support what he's doing, from the like these the Project Mayhem people, all the workers like in the like more menial jobs, the blue collar jobs, all the way up to like the very well paid the cops. Not, I guess the problem is I didn't think about how to sort of like categorize and classify this. But also I think it's hard to talk about because I do think it's a little bit hard to quite believe at that point in the movie.
It's like it's more about like things being implied rather than told. So it's a little bit hard to like quantify or qualify, whatever the word I'm looking for right now is, what like different people's responsibilities are. But right. I think your point is that Project Mayhem basically becomes everybody by the end of the movie. Like everybody's in on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it like I guess it is anarchic in the sense that like I don't know, I get the feeling that like by the end like it is like a bottom up organization where like, you know, the cops are like, if anybody, even you, tries to mess with Project Mayhem, we gotta take his balls.
What's interesting about it is that it's a bottom up organization, that this movie purports to show you like a possible world where, or a possible situation, the conditions in which something like a bottom-up social change of that magnitude could take place and people would support it popularly. Imagine like there being a network of people that was that well like tuned of an organization that they could take out these massive buildings without killing anybody and without cop intervention. Like it's an incredible vision. It's not likely, but that is, I think, one of the values of the movie, is that like we don't often get shown situations in our media that are aimed at, I think, the structures that, I don't know, the hyperstitions, the structures of society, like the structuring ideology of society that show you a fantasized version of that, like crumbling apart in a way that is like actually subtle and actually threatens like the systems of power. Like it's one thing to have a movie about like a great battle or a regime change or whatever, but in those movies like nothing really changes. The thing about Fight Club that's interesting to me is that there's no model for what happens in Fight Club in history that I'm aware of. That might just because it's completely impossible. But I think that's also like tied up in why it's valuable, why it's an interesting movie, and why I also don't understand why the alt-right claim this movie. Kind of lame. I mean, I'm not saying that it's a good model. I'm just saying that it doesn't really seem like a right-wing movie to me.
I guess I'll advertise the Patreon real quick by saying that I wrote a little brief review of this movie that's going to appear on Patreon, and you can get it for, what is it, $1? $1, come on.
One doll hair.
It's gosh. Ugh. It's one of the it's one of these kind of movies that is like aimed at a particular audience, and it's about that same audience, and it's destined to go over their heads. I mean, it's like that Rugrats episode about the Holocaust. Like, it's like 4 like little Jewish kids that are having to reconcile like understanding like something that a family went through, and obviously it's like a baby show. It's just like, I don't know, in that way I think it was like kind of doomed to fail, or maybe like it's, who is it that said the medium is the message? Like maybe
Marshall McLuhan.
Oh my god. Fucking McClunky. You know, maybe it succeeds by showing us that the demographic doesn't understand it. Maybe that's the point. You know?
I have a bunch of disorganized notes that I want to touch on. Can I start with those? Awesome. Thank you. So the first thing that I wrote down was the scene. So there's 2 times when human sacrifice gets directly evoked. I think 3 times when it's brought to our attention, right, in the movie. First time is when Tyler is explaining to Jack the process of soap making. He talks about I mean, this is obviously fictional, but he presents it as though it's a historical fact, and not extreme speculation. He talks about like, on the top of the hill, that's where the human bodies were sacrificed. People noticed that at a certain point in the river, if they washed their clothes there, their clothes got cleaner. That's because rainwater was running through the ash on top of the hill, creating lye, like and frothing up the river and accumulating in one part of the river. And if people washed their clothes there, their clothes got cleaner. So that's because soap is, of course, a theme in the movie. Like, there's a bunch of interesting. I feel like that probably in the book, maybe the themes would have been. I want to hope that the themes would have been like a little bit more robust, because I think there was a lot of cool themes in this movie that didn't quite get.
Well, there's like a theme of gluttony, right?
Yes, gluttony. Like the thing about like fat as a metaphor, liposuction being made into soap, human like there's this chain of associations which runs through the movie, which is awesome, and you love that. But any individual moment when the theme is being sort of exercised or focused on, it's not. Parasite does a really good job with the themes. The themes are, I think there's a different structure to the way that they're organized and associated with each other in Parasite, and it's maybe not as like, I don't know, psychedelic there as it is here. But here it's also not as well utilized always. But I don't want to spend time criticizing it. I want to focus on a moment when it's really well done, or when something really interesting happens, right? Which is, so we're thinking about human sacrifice anyways. It's already been mentioned. One night, while they're doing some kind of stunt, performance art, terror
it's
stunt
when they let the
involving
ball
some
go,
computers. Right? No, it's earlier. It's when they're like blowing up Macintoshes, I think. So they go into a gas station. They pull this clerk out into the parking lot. His name's Raymond. Tyler says, we're going to do a human sacrifice. And Jack seems to be concerned that Tyler's actually going to kill this guy. Makes him get on his knees, takes his ID, reads it, asks him some questions about himself. What do you want to do? What do you do? Doesn't really say anything at first. He makes the guy say, again, this thing about him making him say something, making him say what he wants. Oh, I want to be a veterinarian. I want to work with animals. That's what I want. Tyler says, well, like, why are you here then? Why are you working at a gas station? Blah, blah, blah. He basically acts like he's about to kill him, and then he says, okay, no, actually, what's going to happen is you're going to go home and you're going to do everything you can to become a veterinarian, and I'm going to check in on you 6 weeks from now, and if you're not doing everything you can to meet that goal, your goal, then I'm gonna kill you. And the guy runs away, and Tyler's rationalization of this, or his philosophy, is tomorrow he's gonna wake up and he's gonna eat breakfast. He's gonna eat breakfast, and it's gonna be the best food he's ever tasted. He finally gave him permission to do what he wants in his life, And I thought that was interesting. I don't agree with it. This is one of those moments in the movie where like it shows you
It's not a sound method.
No, it shows you something about the way things are now by giving you a wrong solution for how to fix those things. And I think that's what I meant when I said this movie is cool. It shows you an alternative to like social change, but it's not the alternative that I would pick. It's anarchy in one particular sense, but it's not really anarchy. It's like this like dark, traumatic, violent.
No, it's like
that
the
could never
prose
really
of
take hold.
anarchy versus the poetry of it.
Yes, yeah. Or maybe it's the reverse. Maybe this is like the popular poetry of anarchy. This is like what people think of, this kind of shit. But the thing about it that it gets right about anarchy, not the extreme violence, not the indiscriminate, like, I don't know, the horrible brainwashing, but the fact that something can become autonomous and continue to function without a leader, right? Can be organized. The thing that it gets wrong is that it takes one guy to radicalize all these people in a particular way.
But the guy that does it isn't real, which is another interesting wrinkle.
Right, of course. I mean, the thing about Fight Club as being like the thing that permits this kind of anarchy, like it permits this kind of reorganization. It permits like a complete restructuring of people because like there's something about the implication is that something that we couldn't see unless we experienced it. Like the thing that makes this whole all make sense is that it hides exactly what it is that frees these people, right? Like we're not in Fight Club, so we don't experience what they experience. We don't have that moment of like, okay, letting go of our lives and organizing the structure. So there's always the possibility in this movie that what the movie's conclusions are, what the logic of the movie is, could really manifest, but we just don't know. I do reject it, but I think that's what makes the movie interesting. Is that it gives us an alternative and it also withholds something from us and says, well, you can't really know the viability of this without living it. But anyway, I know you were going to say something, but I do want to just kind of like return to what I was going to say and then kind of finish it and then I'll finish this thread and then I'll turn it over to you. So the thing about the human sacrifice that was interesting to me, like what I had written down was that there's a sense in which I think this is like, this is what a lot of people truly want, is to be told that like, because how often do you hear like some rich person who, their story at least is that they came from very little and they got a lot of stuff. Oh, I had a point in my life where I had nothing, I had nothing I could do. All I had to do was focus on my goal. When you hear people talk like this, it always seems phony. When who haven't made it. When you hear people talk like this who have made it, well, it feels shitty because it's like, well, would I be capable of that? The implicit message, of course, is like, you just got to work harder. So when I see that, I'm like, well, yeah, there's another part in the movie too, when he talks about how like a lot of young men who are slowly realizing that they're not going to amount to anything, and that's like a relatable thing based on like the ideology that you internalize like from a young age. It's something that I legitimately struggle with. Have struggled with anyways, and it gets easier as you get older, but
it's not easy to realize that you're not like Alexander.
Right. There's a right hand and a left hand path, I think, that you can respond with when you are realizing that. And of course this movie represents the left hand path. Anyhow, especially I think it does for a lot of the people who like this movie. And I don't mean left politically, of course. I mean evil. Right. Sorry, left-handed people.
Yeah. I mean, the word is sinister for a reason.
Yeah. Okay, so yes, it's what a lot of us truly want. It's what the part of us that feels inadequate because we can't manifest that kind of drive and nihilistic drive or that energy or whatever. What we kind of want is to be told, okay, you don't want to die, right? So you're doing what you have to do to survive, and then you're stressed because you're not meeting whatever you're told yourself, other people told you your potential is. What he does is he unites you're going to die with, like, you're not going to amount to anything. So that the other choice is, okay, I'm not going to die, and I'm going to do exactly what I want. He makes the world simpler for Raymond. It's interesting that he calls it a human sacrifice, implying that something about his conception of humanity is like that he doesn't have this easy relationship. Like, what he's doing is like killing the possibility that this guy will fail, I think.
There's like some like new Raymond ideas in this movie. Like that, he's not going to be the same guy when he wakes up tomorrow. It's like, I mean, it's just like the thing that, like, I don't know, somebody like Andrew WK talks about, where like the ship of Theseus, I guess, is basically what it is, right?
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, the ship of Theseus is like, if if you reframe it to where it's about a person, like once all the cells in your body have like died and regenerated, like, are you the same person?
Right.
Which is something, the only reason I said Andrew WK is because that's like his weird thing that he talks about a lot.
Okay.
But all I'm saying is that, like, is that going to be the same Raymond that wakes up the next day? Can that be the same person? Did the other Raymond die?
Right, it's kind of an ego death. Yes, that's true.
Because I'm thinking, like, if somebody like made me blurt out like the truth about what my great passion is, and they did that by pointing a gun at me in an alley behind like my dead end job, I probably would recontextualize a lot for me.
Mm-hmm.
I can't imagine it wouldn't.
Yeah. Right. I mean, there's definitely a parallel between that experience and like certain experiences people have on like certain types of drugs and when they are actually about to die. For sure. Yes. So only when you've lost everything are you free to do anything, right? Only when your fear of death is united with your motivation to pursue your dream are you free in this nihilistic sense that Tyler sort of evangelizes, right? That's like his thing. He proselytizes about it. And I think this is the fuel. This is the only thing that makes the American dream really make sense, right? Unless you just get lucky. This is like, so what I think this does to me is it tells me something about the futility or the lie of the American dream. The con of the American dream is that it's literally like, it's antithetical to like your everyday survival. It's antithetical to just living a normal life.
There's a line that Jack says in the movie which didn't make my super secret list for later, but he's like, it's during the therapy part of the movie. I think it's like the first time he runs into Bob when he leaves like a Rorschach test on his chest. Which I wonder if there's like a picture there beside somebody's face, but I
liked that detail. That was
yeah.
Cute. The little
but
Rorschach
he's like,
test.
It reminded me of something that happened in Avatar: The Last Airbender, actually, like something that Aang said in a particular episode. Jack is like, I figured out freedom. Freedom is when you lose all hope. And there's one episode of the of Avatar, I think it's in season 2, when they're trying to get to Ba Sing Se, and Aang's like all beat up because he lost Appa and Momo, and he's like.
Mm-hmm.
I think the monks would probably tell me not to be hopeful in this situation, because hope is like an illusion, and it like removes clarity. And I don't know, I thought that was just a really like beautiful sentiment that I didn't expect from this movie, which is like pretty gruesome the whole time.
Yeah,
it's like pretty awful and depressing and gruesome the whole time, and that's, I don't know, it's interesting that like two of the most optimistic moments in the movie. Well, there's one that we'll talk about later. There's a third super optimistic moment in the movie, but one of them is when he decides that he should not be hopeful about his life anymore. And I forgot the other one. I don't remember. Whatever. And then when he shoots himself. Oh, Raymond. Duh. Raymond obviously is the other one I was thinking about.
Weren't we talking about this like anti-hope sort of message last week as well? Because I know that George Carlin,
did we do a podcast
I was surprised to see that. Yeah.
Oh, that's right, we did.
Yeah. Anyways, I was surprised to see that George Carlin was like, I didn't expect that to be like a current in his comedy, but at least in his later comedy, like I was watching some of his stuff, and something that keeps coming back is like fuck hope.
I mean, there is a certain part of that rings true. It's like, it does, like, make things less clear. It does serve to obfuscate reality. I mean, it certainly isn't a bad thing to have. I would never tell somebody, like, just don't be hopeful. Just resign yourself. But, I don't know, for me, it's, like, inspirational a little bit.
There's the Pandora's box shit, like, that, like, you know, she opens the box and the only thing that's left when all the horrible things come out into the world that plague everybody, the only thing that's left is hope. Like, that sucks. They, like, tell you that in school because, like, it works well with, I think, a lot of the other values you're supposed to internalize in American school. But it sucks. I don't know. There's something about that always felt a little bit, oh, shit, that's crummy. Even as a kid.
Definitely.
Like, why couldn't it have been something cool, like flying powers?
Yeah.
Hope.
Flight, yeah. Yeah, you're right. I mean, so am I, because you're right,
it's the worst one.
The worst one.
The worst one stayed. And we don't even get credit for hope. It was in the box.
Yeah, it's not even something we came up with.
At least it could be something, like, maybe made into an empowering thing. But no, when it's something that you were just given because it was the last thing left, I think that matters to my overall conception of it.
Yeah, so like the three big, like, moments where, like, I think this movie is, like, inspirational is when he decides that he can't be hopeful anymore, and then he turns into a penguin or something, and then the Raymond stuff, and then when he shoots himself at the end of the movie, which is, like, super brutal. I didn't remember how brutal that was. The thing that really got me wasn't, like, him, like, holding his throat and, like, choking on his own blood or anything. It was just seeing the shockwave on his cheeks. Super brutal.
That's rough.
So okay, so I don't know where you think we're at in the outline yet, but is Marla real? Nobody really acknowledges her in the movie, really, do they?
Apparently in the book it's not clear. The way that it ends, it's not clear. I think it was clear in the movie. It was pretty clear that she was seen and interacted with by other people, at least at the very end.
Oh, really?
I think in the last scene.
Oh, I mean...
Right, it's not necessarily enough. But I don't want to go off last scenes.
It's not, because Tyler interacts with people while Jack is doing other stuff.
Fair.
I just wasn't sure. For anybody who's curious, I didn't watch the movie this time. I've seen this movie. Definitely double digits. If somebody else were to tell me that I've watched this movie more than 100 times, I would believe them. So I didn't watch it this time. What I did do was I watched a reaction video to like try and see it with some fresh eyes. And it was a little bit enlightening for me. I've never dwelt too much on the thing with Raymond until I watched that today.
Okay, you know what?
No.
I was wondering this whole time, what are Chuck Palahniuk's politics? Right? Because
I was on his Wikipedia page. I think he was like, I think his political ideology was listed as a nihilist.
Yeah, I think it's that would make sense. In a similar way to Thomas, I get similar vibes again from Thomas Ligotti, where
he was Nosferatu, right? It's just a joke.
But not quite. Also, it's different.
So, do you want me to read the subsection about themes on Chuck Palahniuk's Wikipedia page?
Themes in his fiction in general.
Yeah.
Sure, and then maybe we could cap it off. I wanted to just like talk about what the fuck is his political ideology really, like how does it manifest? Because I have a quote from him as well that's very vague.
Exactly, like the praxis versus the orthopraxy versus the orthodoxy. Yeah. So Palahniuk's books prior to Lullaby have distinct similarities. The characters are people who have been marginalized in one way or another by society, and often react with self-destructive aggressiveness. He labels these stories as transgressional fiction. Beginning with Lullaby, the style of his novels changed to mostly satirical horror stories.
Interesting.
Palahniuk's writing often contains anti-consumerist themes. Writing about Fight Club, Paul Kennett argues that because the narrator fights with Tyler Durden are fights with himself, and because he fights himself in front of his boss at the hotel... what? That's not how that happens in the movie. Okay. The narrator is using the fights as a way of asserting himself as his own boss. These fights are a representation of the struggle of the proletarian at the hands of the higher capitalist power. By asserting himself as capable of having the same power, he thus becomes his own master. Later, when Fight Club is formed, the participants are all dressed and groomed similarly, allowing them to symbolically fight themselves at the club and gain the same power. In an interview with HuffPo, Palahniuk says that the central message of Fight Club was always about the empowerment of the individual through small, escalating challenges. And then there's another short subsection called Reception and Criticism. The content of Palahniuk's works has been described as nihilistic. Palahniuk has rejected this label, stating that he is a romantic, and that his works are mistakenly seen as nihilistic because they express ideas that others do not believe in. Interesting.
That makes sense. I'm saying that basically it's a cop-out to call him a nihilist.
It's so interesting that it can be read both ways.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because they're like so opposite.
And I think it has to do with, I think his statement, his response is also a challenge. No, like actually identify emotionally with what's happening there. You know, the thing about being a nihilist is that if someone's a nihilist and you're not, you can challenge something that you don't resonate with as lacking meaning, right? Lacking meaning or lacking a clear objective, which I think is wrong and too simple. But to actually engage with it is I don't know. Especially when you know that he doesn't actually consider himself a nihilist. It's like, well, what is he saying? Probably not. Nothing matters. Or rather, I've heard him later say, like, later come closer to embracing the idea of nihilism, but he puts it differently. I think he calls himself some kind of like a positive nihilist or something like that, in the sense that there is something that can be gained from embracing this kind of attitude.
Well, it's like the whole idea of how, like, you know, in Taoism, for example, the value of like a gourd is that it is empty. Right? The reason that like a box is useful is because there's empty space.
Yeah, so I see that he had said something similar, which is my politics are empowering the individual and allowing the individual to make what they see as the best choice. That's what Fight Club was about. It was a lot of psychodrama and gestalt exercises that would empower each person. Then ideally each person would leave Fight Club and go on to live whatever their dream was, that they would have a sense of potential and ability they could carry into whatever it was they wanted to achieve in the world. It wasn't about perpetuating Fight Club itself. When I read that, I was surprised, because that seems almost like a pro-American dream message. My takeaway from the movie was, this is an example.
I mean, the American dream is good. It's just that it doesn't exist.
Yeah, but right. That's the thing. When I say the American dream, I'm not just saying everyone should have X, because, communists want that too. I'm only saying the idea that it's up to you and that you have to suffer to get it. I thought that was the message in the movie seemed to be like, that's shitty. Like to put it really bluntly.
Well, it can be shitty and true.
Right, but what I'm saying is, it sounds like what he's saying is that if you read this book, my goal is that you'll be able to do that. Which I guess is a nihilistic message in itself, to be honest, because he's not challenging the arrangement. He's only trying to get you to be able to participate in it.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I hadn't really thought through that. I didn't expect it would go there when we were talking about it. Apparently, another thing that he's gotten a lot is that people have approached him, and this is from the same interview, and let him know that Fight Club helped them in some way realize their potential or realize something about themselves. One thing that I thought it was interesting he highlighted, which this is a theme in the... Well, here's really what it was about. Many people decided to, as a permission through nihilism, to go ahead and to do the thing that they dreamt of doing. And a lot of fathers and sons were able to connect to this story and express their frustration about what little parenting they themselves got from their fathers. Thought that was very interesting, because that is a theme. That's an important part of the masculinity element of this movie, which we didn't really directly talk about. The idea that kind of you caricaturize masculinity and you caricaturize like the fantasy of not being subjugated by a boss, right? Like, I mean, there's, this turns into like master-slave shit, which I don't really know how to talk about master-slave dialectic because I haven't read Nietzsche or Hegel or whatever shit, but like, but I just mean like, there's a bunch of different ways, Jesus is one model for like subverting like hegemonic power, right? Like a really good guy that everybody decided to remember, and it turned into a religion. This is like, no, instead of trying to like turn the other cheek, literally just abuse yourself in order to completely internalize the master-slave dialectic within you, thereby becoming free from it in a completely different way, making it into making it seem silly and meaningless. Like if you could hit yourself in front of your boss, what is your boss's role?
Yeah, I mean, there's like a bunch of like self-flagellation motifs in this movie.
I think that's key to the message, to the way that the movie clowns on social hierarchy is, and even clowns on the hope of like subverting the social hierarchy.
Yeah, I think one of the things about this movie is that it kind of frames like masculinity in a way that you don't think about it necessarily, where like, to me, I think of like, when I think of like how femininity is portrayed, at least in like the culture that I belong to, versus masculinity, is that femininity is all about like intrinsic value. Like, like women are all about like, the idea is that like the woman is like, the person that supplies love in the family or whatever, where the father is all about like extrinsic value. Like it's about what you can provide. It's about like what you bring home with you. It's like, whether it's like from the hunt or like if you're like, you're bringing home the bacon or whatever.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And like, I don't know, there's something that this movie like makes all the characters do is like find intrinsic value in themselves. And because all the characters but Marla are men, like you kind of are forced to think about it in terms of masculinity, as opposed to just like humanity.
No, I think that an important. I love that you just said that too. The thing that you focused it on, like finding intrinsic value in yourself. Like they're doing something that I think is impossible, right? I think that the premise of the movie, it's a ridiculous thing that you would never think people would do, and therefore it functions as like a possibility, a possible way forward, right? An answer to certain things that feel like they have no answer in the world right now. That's what's the genius of the book, probably also, and the movie, definitely. Is to me, is that it shows you people basically finding intrinsic value by completely internalizing masculine domination within themselves, freeing themselves from masculinity by literally hitting themselves, doing the most masculine thing you could think of to do, which is to like give an outward display of force, no words, no love, just force, and therefore free themselves.
You literally can't talk about it.
You literally can't talk about it. That's so good. That's a defining thing about Fight Club, is literally that you can't talk about it. I think that's what that means, is that you can't talk about masculinity. Like you can't figure out masculinity by talking about it. The reason that this movie functions for me is because it shows you an impossibility. And I think that what this movie's subtext is for me is masculinity is not, frustrated men who were like not parented enough or whatever, not given attention by their fathers that they felt like they needed or whatever, don't know how to make sense of the world given the masculinity that they were taught, are not going to find meaning or freedom through that masculinity. I think ultimately the movie shows you, what's it called? Reductio ad absurdum. Like it reduces it to the absurdest possible conclusion and then shows you a result a satisfying result, but a result that could never actually flow forward from the premises of the movie. And that's the critique, I think, for me.
Yeah, I mean, I really appreciate that this movie hyper focuses on like the distillation of masculinity and shows you the absurdity of it. Yeah. Okay, because it is like I mean, it does show you the things that you're taught as a boy, right? Boys don't cry. Boys don't talk about their feelings. They get mad, and then once they can't pretend not to be mad anymore, then they lash out and they hit somebody. I've been there. I just can't imagine that from you. I don't know why. It just seems like instead of that you would have like Stranger Things powers or something. But yeah, this movie is all about like fighting. I mean, it turns from like fist fighting to like bomb fighting eventually. Mm-hmm. And then a guy fights himself with a gun. And you can't talk about it. I don't know. It never occurred to me until just a few minutes ago, but I think it's so brilliant that they go the extra mile in telling you don't talk about it. It's the first two rules. Don't talk about Fight Club, and do not talk about Fight Club. He even doesn't say it exactly the same. Well, hot diggity damn. I love that. Fight Club's a great movie. Thank you for listening to Depth Perception. You can support us by subscribing to our YouTube channel, kicking us a little bit of scratch on Patreon.